All right. So, what do you think happens after someone dies?
So I'm the kind of person who has to kind of see something to believe it. So I guess I couldn't really tell you until I died.
Okay. Okay. So, see it to believe it. Is that kind of like everything for you
Yeah,
in your life?
yeah, kind of a science guy. I like numbers and proof.
Proof. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, do you believe in God's existence?
Uh, haven't seen him, so
Okay. Okay. No, that's totally fine. So, kind of the worldview I represent, just so you know, I represent like the Christian worldview. So, like, do you have like a past with Christianity at all or anything like that?
not really. Easter, we'd go to
Uh,
church on
okay.
Easter sometimes, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No worries, no worries. So you said you were like into science. Did you go to college for science or anything like that?
No,
No.
no. I just worked on the ocean until recently, like 4 years ago. I moved over here.
Okay, that's awesome. So, so science, would you agree like is based on like reasoning, logic, um, like induction? I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Yep.
that, but
Yep, I agree.
yeah. So
All that stuff.
it's been interesting. So from like, and I say this with like all respect to you for sure. It's been interesting, but from my worldview, so I have like a meaningful justification for those things, right? So like for like logic, right? You can't see, taste, smell a logic, but
Yeah,
they're
true.
like transcendental, right? Like they transcend to like Sweden, the same they do in the United States, right?
Oh yeah.
And are those things true?
That they.
Like they exist basically, like the laws of
Oh
logic.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Logic. There's. Well, I guess it's kind of in people's heads, but you could kind of come up with your own stuff. I guess for logic, you
Sure.
can kind of just say it's logic is grass if you want, but I guess it's all in the mind.
Mm.
Pretty much.
Mhm.
Mind is power.
Okay, so logic is a man-made concept.
From what I believe, yeah.
Okay. So if I were to be like the sun is like square and blue and cold, would you say what would you say to that?
Not logical, I guess you could say, because I can see the sun. It's circle and the sky's blue and sun's yellow.
So you're using your reasoning to get there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So and again, I'm not trying to like prod or anything like this, but just asking questions. Do you like is there like a can you give me a meaningful justification for why your reasoning is valid? Because there are some people's reasoning, right, that's not valid.
Yeah.
I've met people that reasoning
Yeah.
is like,
Some
whoa.
people, yeah, they just come up with their own reasoning in their head and they just they stick with that. And some people go by what they see or what they hear or smell or taste.
So why is your reasoning valid? Is the question.
Well, I guess depending on who you ask, it's not valid or it could be valid, I guess. Just depending on, like I said, how someone sees your logic and reasoning compared to their logic and reasoning, I
So
guess.
so it's up to the individual to figure out what it means for them.
Yeah, what they're kind of consuming, I guess, with their mind. Like,
So does that like how if I were to you disagreed with me right about the sun being cold and square and blue. I don't actually believe that, but if I were to believe it, uh, is there any justification for you telling me I'm wrong?
uh, not really, because I can't touch the sun and feel that, like, I can feel that it's hot from here, but I don't know for sure that's from the sun. So I guess back to just seeing and believing and feeling, and I believe in that kind of stuff.
Sure. So, yeah. So, I mean, like, we're talking about immaterial things, right?
Yeah.
So, we're talking about like logic, reasoning, rationale, how we come to those conclusions, how we even know anything exists. Do you believe things exist? I mean, that sounds like a silly question, but
That I don't see. Um, there are some things that obviously exist, like numbers and science can prove that things exist, but you know, can't really actually be like, oh yeah, I know that exists because I haven't touched it or seen it or, you know.
But it does exist.
But yeah, it does exist.
So why do you believe that?
I guess there's just a lot of things that just exist and we don't know why, I guess you could say.
Can I give you kind of my reasoning for like, and see if it makes sense to you?
Of course.
So I would say that those things are meaningful, and I have a justification for all those because those are transcendental things that actually are derivative of like a mind. So for example, like science is based off like the uniformity in nature, the laws of induction. The past will be like the future, right? I'm not scared that if I'm going to jump off this ground, that gravity's going to randomly stop working.
Yeah,
I'm actually going to be pulled down because
Yeah.
I actually have justification for that the universe was like created for like reason, purpose, has order, not chaos. Like why do we have reason and not chaos?
Yep.
And that and then even moving the conversation to this part of it, we actually have a conscience, right? So like no animals set up court systems.
Yeah.
At least I haven't seen any bears
Yeah.
bears set up any court
Yeah,
systems yet.
Crazy court.
But but we have a conscience, and I had to wrestle with that before I was a Christian. I had to kind of think through like, why is this crazy thing like a conscience exist? Why do we care about justice? Where does that even come from? Like again, another immaterial thing that is just like so relevant in our culture. And like when someone like steals your wallet, you feel like, or like cuts you off in line or like in traffic, there's something in you that jumps, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Yep, I totally agree with that.
Okay. So with that being said, do you have any reason to feel that way? Like ultimately, like in the end, like is from your worldview?
No. I am one of the people, I guess, who try not to act on emotion too much. So
Sure. Yeah.
if I like get really grumpy or with someone, I just try to, stay calm.
Okay, is that a good thing?
Sometimes not. Sometimes other people can be overpowering and stuff, and then there's me. I'm just calm. Just
So, again, kind of coming from like the worldview I come from, that's what I believe like being good, like calm, like there's goodness, there's ultimate evil as well, and that there's evil in the world, right? So there's like injustice in the world, and that's like that was hard for me to wrestle. And I'm like, whose standard am I measuring that by? Is that beyond me, or is that like determined by me? Because if it's just determined by me, and someone says, like, hey, I think you're wrong. I think, and this is a terrible example, but like molesting children's correct. And I'd be like, you're absolutely wrong.
yeah,
And that's not because I think so.
right.
There's something in me that jumps. And I would say that's because we're made in the image of God.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? So, just kind of picking it back up. Like, if there is a God, would he care about justice, like being good, right?
I believe so. He wouldn't just, I feel like, create us just to do bad. I guess there is some bad, but there's also good. And it's up to people to choose, I guess.
Okay, so would you consider yourself to be a good person?
Yeah.
Have you ever told a lie?
Yeah.
Have you ever stolen anything?
Yeah.
Have you ever, so like, again, coming from a Christian worldview, like Jesus said, if you look at a woman with lust, you commit adultery with her in your heart, because that's where like the start of things like are in your heart.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at a person with lust?
Yeah.
I'm guilty of all those. So, and like, right. So if you like murdered someone, you would be, considered a murderer, right?
Yeah.
Even if you did it one time and felt bad about it.
Right.
So sitting here, I've told one lie. I would say that makes me a liar. Would you agree with that logic?
In ways, yeah. Lying is lying. There's that's it. Lying is lying. So I guess, yeah, if you lie, you're a liar.
So I always go do like, if there is an afterlife, and if there is say like justice, like hell, like God's prison without parole, and heaven, do you think you're good enough to go there, go to heaven? All right, man. So, like I was just saying, in a courtroom, right?
Yeah.
And you're guilty, and there's a just judge. Is he going to just let you go because, like, I'm sorry, right? Like, judge, I didn't mean to. And he's like, you should be sorry, right? Like, you deserve this. So what God did in guilty sinners is he became a man. Like, it says all the deity dwelt in Jesus perfectly, right? Like, he was God in the flesh. God became God in the flesh in Jesus, lived the perfect life that none of us could, and then was crucified on the cross, dying the death we deserved, and then was resurrected on the third day, defeating death. And the response to that is we have to turn to that and trust in him in faith, right? And God actually gives us his righteousness, and we don't stop trusting our own. It's kind of like putting on a parachute, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can believe in a parachute, but unless you put it on, it's not going to really do anything for you. So what I would say to you is, like, put on the parachute, and that's turning to Christ and actually, like, trusting in his goodness, not our own, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I've seen the little movies, that they have on the whole Jesus on the cross thing, and it makes sense completely.
Yeah, so if there is a God and he's morally good and we're guilty, then this is what God did on the cross. He paid the fine. Jesus actually said, it's finished, meaning, like, the debt's been paid on your behalf. What was your name again? Sorry?
Trevor?
Luke. My name's Luke. So good to meet you, man. Yeah, so Jesus paid the fine, right? If we're in court and Jesus, like, he paid it for the fine, and that allows the judge to legally dismiss the case.